Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final Stately office hours of 2021. This is where we answer your questions that you have about Stately and about XState. We talk about what we've been working on and get your feedback on that. We'll do quick team intros first. I'm Laura Kalberg, and I do developer and designer relations for Stately. David?
Yeah, I'm David, the founder of Stately. I created XState, and yeah, it's me.
We'll go Farzad next.
Hello, I'm Farzad, and I do engineering in the Stately.
And Matt, who is currently a black box.
I'm a black box, although I did actually wave to the camera that doesn't work when at the start of the video, which was stupid. But yeah, I'm Matt, and I do engineering at Stately.
It's a very end of year feeling going on, I think. And if you have any questions for us or anything you want to share with us, you can leave it in the comments on YouTube. If you're on Twitter, you can @message us from the tweet there, or you can use hashtag #StatelyOfficeHours. Or if you want to join our Discord, should already be there. It's really great. You go to discord.gg/xstate, and we've got a dedicated office hours channel in there. And I'll be keeping my eye out across all those channels if you've got any questions or anything that you want to ask us. So first up this week, David, you've been doing an Ask Me Anything on IndieHackers. It's a very nice long URL for you there.
Oh yeah, so yeah, IndieHackers asked me to do an AMA. Not really active right now, but if you want to ask me anything, then you could do it on the show. You could do it on Discord, or you could do it in the IndieHackers link in the forum. If you have a membership to IndieHackers, they were supposed to send me invite codes, but I don't see those invite codes. So yeah, just talking about the company, how we got started. So please, feel free to ask me anything.
Great. And yeah, we can always answer questions in here, but maybe if in the week you've come up with something and you want to catch up with David over there, because I think that the thread will still be up over the next week or so. And of course, we won't be doing office hours for the next couple of weeks. So it's a perfect opportunity to get your questions in and get David back to work. Yep. Ruin his holiday.
Yep.
And next, we have Matt. You're going to give us a demo in Voice of God mode at the top of your demo of AST. I'm not even sure what AST is. Would you explain it for us?
Sure. So this is a the way I described it to you guys was sort of fairly dull and boring. Like, this is AST stuff. And what does that actually mean in terms of XState, in terms of what we're building, in terms of everything that's going on? Well, first of all, what I've got VS Code on my left-hand side here, and it's just got a machine here. You can see that it has a first state, it has a second state, and it has an event which goes from the first state to the second state. The idea of this is that on my right-hand side, I've got a machine which is running in our visual editor, which is currently in closed beta, and you can gain access to it by asking in the Office Hours channel. And what I'm going to do is I want you to watch the left-hand screen very, very closely as I do this. I'm going to add a new state to machine name here. Let's add it. And new state 3 has appeared in the left-hand panel. Let me do that again. Add another state. New state 4 has entered the chat. We can add a new state in here, and it adds it as a substate there. Let's go again, add more states. And let's add an event going from new state 1 to new state 2. Event 1 now appears in the left-hand panel with this kind of quite long target here. Let's change the name, new event, and we have new events coming through there. This is kind of crazy. This is, as you can see, fairly buggy. We've also got this sort of random always, which appears there. If I grab that again, we can go new state over here. And of course, things are slowly breaking. But this is like, I wanted to show you this before the holidays because this is a kind of glimpse into the future, which is where we're kind of able to use this machine code on the left-hand side of the source. So this is now the source of our state machine, and you can use the visual editor to actually edit your code and influence it. This is kind of crazy, and I can't really believe it's real This is sort of the work, or as a result of all the work that we've been doing over the past few months or so, being able to parse state machines, being able to view them in the inspector, which you can do today with the VS Code extension. You now can do AST transforms using the visual editor inside your code, which is kind of crazy exciting. This is by far like nowhere near complete, but I mean, David, this is something that we kind of talked about like a year ago, probably, and this has been something that's been on our mind for a long time, right?
Yeah, at first it seemed like something that's almost impossible, like a dream, but yeah, I think we're finally getting that bi-directional code editing thing. Like a lot of people are saying like, this is awesome, this is incredible, and I believe that too. Like the whole Northern Star that we want to reach, or at least one of them, is the fact that you could edit things both in code naturally or in a diagram editor like you see Matt is doing right now. And previous attempts to do this have been like you're pretty much forced into a very strict DSL. So you're forced to basically write your code in JSON if you're using AWS step functions. But we're trying to go the extra mile or extra kilometer, depending on where you are in the world, and make it so that you could write natural code and have that updated in the editor and just go bi-directional. So Eric was asking, does it sync back the other way too? If you want to answer that.
It does indeed. It does it in a very minor way right now, which is, as you can see, it grabs all the information, so first state, second state, new state 4, and it just sort of piles them on top of each other. That's because David is working on an auto layout algorithm that will take this information and try to sync it back the best way that we can. And the idea is that with some other sort of innovations that we're going to put in soon, is you'll be able to just kind of open this file and it will remember where everything is. And it will remember kind of how to sync everything and how to position everything. Because it's important to get the layout right, because the layout can it can really influence kind of the meaning of the state chart and people's understanding of it.
It's just so cool. For the newbies amongst us, what does AST actually stand for?
Yeah, so this is super. This is kind of, I gave you like the actual thing I was working on, which is AST transformations. AST is an abstract syntax tree. So if you go to AST Explorer, you can basically have some kind of code over on the left here. And what an AST tool will do is it will take that code and it will transform it into this abstract expression of the code. So you can see that every single thing here has is kind of expressed in this abstract syntax tree over here. So this is like a property where we have an identifier, object expression, that kind of thing. And this is the technology that we're using in order to, as Eric says, kind of do these awesome state tricks and kind of bring this code into reality. And this is something that I've been kind of deep in over the past 6 months or so, trying to understand XState machines through AST. And it's sort of finally getting to where I really want it to be, which is crazy and really exciting and not something I thought was actually possible when I started out on it.
Yeah, it is just amazing to watch. I had a jaw drop moment just watching it all pop up at the side. It was really, really cool.
It's just nuts, yeah. Like, I mean, the fact as well that it's like, as Scott, sorry for butchering your last name, Suraj is saying, yeah, I think this, like, there's so much that's really powerful about this. For instance, the ability to just retarget a node. So like before, you'd have to like track kind of where you wanted this new node to go, or like moving this event to somewhere else. But now you just click and drag it over, and it just drags it over. Create a new event, stick it there. Okay, great. Let's actually just retarget this to somewhere else. And now it's doing that. So it just makes, again, it allows a whole load of bugs and sort of usability issues with XState sort of disappear, because you can never get a target wrong. You can never get a state name incorrect. It's really, really exciting. So Siraj, it is Siraj. Nice. Okay, cool. Good stuff.
Jan's asking, can you recommend any resources for learning to work with ASTs?
Oh, it was really hard, I have to say. I had to just basically brute force play with them, and using the AST Explorer is really, really helpful. This sort of gives you an idea of what everything is supposed to do. If you happen to work with Mateusz Brzezinski, Anderist, just try and get on a job with him, because he used to maintain Babel and he knows everything there is to know about ASTs. And yeah, I think just start playing around with it, and it's quite it's not actually as hard as it seems. And the tools that Babel provide, there's also something called the Babel Handbook as well, which is super famous. When you kind of understand how to build plugins and the general architecture, it will start revealing itself to you slowly. But yeah, it's fairly hard to learn. I found it quite hard to learn.
Oh, that's cool. I'll share those links in the description for the video later in the week, so that anyone wants to read up on it, they can. Now, next up, we had Fazard. You wanted to ask folks a question, so we'll see if we can get your feedback on this.
Sure. Yeah. So I talked with Eric today, and if you don't know who Eric is, I'm sorry, Eric, I can't probably pronounce your last name properly. That's why I'm avoiding that. Eric is the creator of FinalForm.js, and I had a meeting with him today. And this is because we're working on a draft of what we want the XState form library, the official form integration for XState, to look like next year. Spoiler alert, we're going to work on XState form, query, and router for being able to work with the network requests, for being able to work with forms, and to work out the routers in your application. And the form is the one that I'm taking initiative to work on. So my question is, if you imagine forms in your applications, form are, as Laura put, they are self-contained. They are, is that the right word, Laura? Was that the word?
Yeah, well, I think that you're talking about the fact that they're, as part of the application, you explained to me that it's like an island.
Exactly. If the applications are the entire world, forms are like other components, islands in the map. And it means regardless of how complicated they can get, even if you have 600 inputs in the form, well, that's based on truth. And they can contain the complexity in themselves. That means their information, their state, regardless of how complicated they are, might not even leak to the outside world. So my question is using Formic, FinalForm.js, or other libraries enough for you to work out forms with XState, or do you actually have a good real-world use case of why XState form would be beneficial to develop and maintain by our team? That's what I'm going to ask today.
We have Eric in the chat now as well. He says hi.
We've got kind of two members of form library royalty as well, because we also have the author of React Redux form here too, right?
Oh gosh.
That's true.
Wow,
the same person, right?
No.
Okay. I thought you were mentioning Eric again, because he also maintained Redux form before.
So we got Redux form, we've got React Final Form, and we've got React Redux form. It's like the combat for the best NPM package name.
Interesting story behind that. I made React Redux form as a response to Redux form, and that's actually how I got to know Eric and realized that making form libraries that try to make everyone happy is just a really, really difficult task. And so the better approach, which I believe FinalForm is taking, is instead give you the building blocks to assemble the form logic yourself, instead of trying to anticipate use cases. Because as soon as you anticipate use cases, you're going to make the majority happy, but then you're going to make those advanced use cases really, really hard to do. And so it's better to just have the building blocks so that, you could just maybe do a little extra work to get the exact behavior that you want, but still you're going to have a really robust form that does exactly what you want to do. So
it's kind of intimidating going towards thinking about building a new form library, because everyone's got an opinion on forms, right? Kind of like CSS. Everyone's got an opinion on CSS. Everyone's got a way they like to do it. Everyone, in React, everyone has a side whether they preferred uncontrolled components or controlled components. Everyone's got an opinion, and form libraries themselves need to serve many, many, many different use cases too. They need to be hyper flexible, because many forms are alike. Probably 60% of forms are fairly similar. But then it's the other 40% that are, they have async validation, that, for instance, or are multi-step, or have different form inputs that are allowed to be done at different times, and all that kind of logic. And I think all of us have built enough CRUD applications to understand kind of how painful that can be, and all the pitfalls that you can fall into, especially when your form library isn't flexible enough. And something that we really are interested in terms of XState form is giving you that flexibility, is giving you the primitives that state machines and state charts have of, because really we're just talking about events. We're talking about on change, on blur, on focus, all that stuff. And we want to somehow draw the line between a form library that sort of is visualizable, let's say, and also that gives you the power that XState can give you to manage complexity.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen a lot of form libraries today not really tackle the use cases that Matt was talking about with regards to multi-step, async validation, dependent fields. Like, some of them try to touch on that, but that gets more in the territory of being opinionated, especially with async validation. Like, when you get into, for example, async validation, now you get into the use case of like, okay, what if the input changes while it's validating? And even then, that's immediately the use case for a state machine. Like, how do you handle those types of inputs? How do you invalidate the current async validation? How do you handle dependent fields and just the different ways that users could go through a form? We really want to make a library that's suitable for, from the smallest forms to like giant forms like tax software. You could imagine those as like just huge state machines and
So
big
if I'm
multi-step forms.
understanding your point correctly here, and Matt's point is we're better off just offering like building blocks and primitives that you can use to build your own state machines.
Right. Yeah. So it's basically just going to be flavoring on top of XState, but with some helpers for, assembling your own forms in state machines.
Yeah, it almost sounds like this level of complexity should have been handled in the browser level. But I'm really sorry that our platforms are not there yet.
Yeah, and to be fair, the browser handles a lot, like including validation. Like, I don't think people realize how powerful just HTML5 validation is, but like you're saying, it's not enough. And async validation isn't handled. Forms are still susceptible to, if you press submit a bunch of times, then it's going to make multiple requests and things like that. So we do need that layer on top of the platform.
As Eric has said here, async validation is the root of all evil. But weirdly, I don't feel scared of async validation when I'm working in pure XState, let's say.
Right.
Because everything's just controlled, everything's easy to manage, everything's nothing impossible is possible. And the issue is that, let's say XState is the mainland, to use Farzad's quote. These form libraries are like little, it's like the island of Jersey or something just off the coast of the UK. We can't quite legislate for everything that's happening in there, and however much we try and control it with XState, it's always going to have its own governance and its own opinion of what's going on. So that was actually a really good metaphor.
It was a really good but very niche metaphor.
Very niche metaphor, yeah. But this is the idea that you can't. XState is really good at controlling things that are within its view, and less good at controlling things, especially because the issue with things like Formic is it's usually Formic receiving the events. It's not XState that's receiving the events, because if XState were to receive the events, then it would be kind of in full control. And that's really where I think we can make a big difference, which is having a thin layer that takes these browser events and just turns them into XState events, and then the user can sort of do things with them. And that would be really, really thin, and it would actually not make a huge difference in terms of like bundle or things like that. So it'd be a relatively thin library if we did it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's our goal. Just provide helpers, a thin library, building blocks.
Eric says, what I love about XState is that it lets me think of async code in a totally different way. Promises can be so complex.
Absolutely. Despite them feeling quite simple, just async await, async await. But yeah, they can be absolutely hellish to use.
I think asynchrony is not necessarily complex. It's just we've been terrified, and we've been suffering from foot guns of thinking in the dimension of time before, which I think we're just scared of error handling. That's what XState is good for. You can just anticipate errors beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also canceling promises too is often something you need to do often in async validation. If you're doing it right, you want to ideally cancel a whole bunch of things. If you're like, let's say you want to ensure that the user's username hasn't been taken before, then as they type, really, you want to be sending things off to the API, but you want to cancel things kind of at the right moment too, because you don't want to flood your API and your root server.
Martin says,
like if you have like a form that sends a post request or something to the backend to make some mutation in the database, and you happen to hit the back button while it was pending, then you probably don't want that update to happen.
Exactly.
I'm not sure whether that's a use case that you can cancel, but anyway.
Martin says, I'm all in for a framework agnostic form library. Eric replied,
it's not going to be framework agnostic. Based on my talk with Eric today, it's going to be even platform agnostic. He mentioned something about using forms and their logic in the command line.
But not only the command line, I'm seeing more and more use cases of like, there's this, common saying where you cannot trust client input. Like, even if we validate it on the clients, that same validation needs to occur on the server. And so when you get into multi-step forms, you can't trust that the client is doing everything in the, exact sequence of steps, necessary. You have to duplicate that on the server. And so you could either reuse code in Node, or, if you have other languages, you still want to reuse that logic, especially the validation logic. So that becomes tricky. And that's why, as you're saying, having something that's platform agnostic is actually preferable to just framework agnostic.
And hopefully with our work next year on XState for the backend, we can reuse the same machine.
Or certainly the same guards and the same actions and some of the same logic for it, because they're different environments and they're logically different. But if we're all talking the same language in terms of context and events and that sort of thing, it's very easy to wire up, and it's all JavaScript at the end of the day.
In the Discord, Devin says, I'm introducing XState at work because of a tough experience with Formic. Formic is awesome, but in our case, with a form with lots of subforms and lots of dependent logic, it got overly complex quickly. Our main concerns that we had that I felt XState will help solve is visibility into what is happening. Because of dependent fields and validation, I need to see what is happening. Pretty interested to see what is going to happen with XState form.
That's exactly the use case we're imagining, right? Like it's kind of like a graph library where everything's going really, really well, and you're getting all the charts that you want, and everything looks really great. But then the client asks for something that isn't possible in your charting library, and you just think, oh no, oh dear, what on earth am I going to do now? Can we, blah 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 blah. It's the same old problem again, and XState has solved that for me and for past projects I've worked on, just by being just so flexible and being able to literally represent anything that can happen in the front end. And hopefully we can bring that to forms as well. And one final thing to say is that it's good to talk about the complex use cases, but we also want to handle the simple use cases really well as well. We also want to handle the 60% of cases where you just want to submit a username and password and submit them. So yeah, being able to do that is important. And so we not only need to deal with the primitives and like the events and states and blah, 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 but also just the really, really simple stuff needs to be a good experience too.
Cool. Well, I wonder whether that's going to be something that's on the people's wish lists for 2022, because what we did this week was we asked people, what is on your XState wish list for 2022? Because we're coming up to the end of 2021. We have a lot in store for you next year, but we wanted to know what you were all after. And if anyone wants to share anything they want to add to their wish list, do let us know in the YouTube comments or on the Discord in the Office Hours channel, or tweet us. I'll find it. I'm sure I will. But these are some of the responses that we got during the week. So first up, Florian Girardi on Twitter said, Angular integration, especially a guide on how to make injectable a machine into a service or a component.
Yeah, that's a good one, and it's been a pretty frequent ask. Like just the integration with Angular projects. So XState pretty naturally works with Angular just because it does adhere to a subscribable interface, and so there's not too much work to get it working within your Angular components. However, things like, again, making it injectable would be pretty nice and useful. And we need to provide guards, or not guards, but guides for integrating XState into Angular rather than just assuming that people know how to. That's my fault.
Yeah,
We'll get there. We will.
It feels like we should have. We've got a recipes with React, recipes with Vue. We need to do one for Angular as well.
So add that to the list. Kent Cedars says remix and stately integration.
I would love this. This is that's really exciting. If you don't know Remix, it's I hesitate to call it a framework, but I guess it sort of is. It's more like using the platform to just create really great web apps and web experiences with minimal JavaScript. The server work that they're doing is really interesting too. So I have to play around more with Remix and see how XState can mix into that. No pun intended. But
so I don't know what is going on with these slides here. They seem to be auto advancing without me. I keep trying to switch them back. It wasn't doing that last week. Very strange behavior. Jan on Discord had a few responses for us. First off, first class support for or a definitive way to combine. Come back.
I think I know what's going on. When we click on the canvas here in the StreamYard, it just goes next.
Okay, so if the rest of you keep your hands to yourselves for a second. First class support for or a definitive way to combine client-side routing and XState. I know it's already possible. I just don't know how to do it well and in a proper top-down manner.
Yeah, so again, just like forms, I think this will come in the form of building blocks. We don't want to control all of routing because there's excellent libraries as well as the platform for that. And users should be able to navigate to whatever link they want to. I mean, that's just how the browser works. But we can provide, first-class helpers for just integrating routing with XState. Because, navigation through a website can be described as a state machine, especially if, you're allowed or not allowed to go to certain links, or you have to go to this link when you click next on the previous link, etc. So there's definitely some fun ideas here.
It's quite an exciting idea too, because it's if you think of like a design, like a visual design done in Figma or things like that, that can represent a state machine. And the thing about that is, like, let's say you have different pages, each with a layout, for instance. Let's imagine that you were to create a state machine based on that design. That state machine would involve the router, it would involve, router. And it would mean that you need to control the router in order to move from different pages, in order to translate that design asset to a state chart and just immediately use it into your app. I think there's something really, really, really exciting about that flow, and we need XState router to be a thing in order to make it happen.
And you also said, and this kind of ties in with other stuff we've spoken about, design by contract, aka newer and cooler type states. I'm guessing this will require some badass, sounds great in my accent, type gen stuff to be as good as it can be. So I'll put that on my list as well.
Yeah, so we recently addressed this in version 5. There was a PR that removed type states, but don't worry, they are going to be replaced. We're just figuring out what the best replacement for it is. So if you don't know what type states are, they're basically a way of saying, when I'm in this state, this is the shape of my context. This is what it looks like. However, the way that you could specify it now is not entirely accurate. It's definitely possible to make a completely invalid type state for your state, and it's never going to be as robust as just doing static analysis on your machine. And so that's why Matt and Mateusz have been working on type gen, which definitely gives you those kinds of insights that we could use in something like design by contract, which can say, like, when I'm in the state, make sure that this is true, make sure that this is false. just things like that. So if you're familiar with invariant expressions, then it's pretty much the same thing, but at the state level.
Yeah, there are some things that we have, at least I have to solve in my head to work out how to integrate like design by contract into type gen, but it's certainly possible, and yeah, like type gen sort of gives you this crazy level of power over TypeScript, because TypeScript and XState sort of don't match very well just on their own, just because we declare a lot of things in like a static object. Whereas TypeScript really wants you to use functions, and it wants you to infer things kind of through variables and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, TypeGen, we're super keen on it. It's looking really, really promising. And kind of just the work on the visual editor and all the progress that you're seeing there has sort of held us up a little bit from shipping that. But it's on our list for sure.
And finally, Jan said more VS Code extension stuff. I don't know exactly what stuff. I just know I love the work Matt has been doing.
Well, visual editor inside VS Code sounds pretty sick to me. I don't know about you.
Does sound very cool. And what have we got coming up in the... We have Taylor saying, being able to dynamically import actors that are shared among back and front ends would be awesome.
Yeah, so I was reading something, I forget exactly what, yesterday, but just the idea. Oh yeah, it was like on monoliths versus microservices. And so one of my dreams, and this is something that I've experimented with X-Actor, which is sort of on pause right now, is just the idea that you create your code or your apps in a modular way, such that you just have actors talking to each other, but the actors don't need to live in separate parts, like in separate servers or anything like that. So you still have that event passing paradigm, but you could have it as sort of like a modular monolith. So now these actors become like these portable things that can really live anywhere and that you could talk to. So yeah, anyway, just doing some more experimentation on that. And yeah, I think that's a great goal.
And Raul says XState query. What would that entail?
This would be kind of like a React query, but for XState, right? We've got like React query. Really, it's quite a small React wrapper on top of some framework agnostic logic, as far as I understand the library. There are things like a query observer where you make queries to it. It handles a lot of caching for you, handles a lot of the complexity that comes with fetching, that sort of thing. And this is something that we think is a really great fit for XState, because XState can manage a ton of this complexity for you. And it's really, we just need to figure out like the caching layer and things like that. And again, this is sort of like, XState is fairly big on its own. You invest a lot to get this really powerful framework. In terms of, you invest a lot of kilobytes of your app, let's say, to get this powerful framework. And something that I find really interesting is that you could just kind of sprinkle a little bit on top of that, and suddenly you've got XState query, suddenly you've got XState form, suddenly you've got XState router as well. And yeah, I find that really, really exciting. And it's something that I think it's probably like less, I think I would probably choose to work on XState form and XState router first, but XState query is still, a powerful use case.
Yeah, well, if anyone else is interested in that, do let us know, because it would be good to know like numbers on these things as well. It's hard for us to know in the kind of bubbles that we're working on, but sounds like you've made a good assessment there, Matt. Eric says, when are we rewriting XState in Rust?
I guess everyone wants to just go on the Rust train. Not sure why. I haven't played around with Rust yet. I know that Matt has, but yeah.
Very, very, very briefly, just to get a small sense of it. Some folks in the community are trying to remake a Rust state machine library and state chart library. I think there are some complications with it just in terms of like static typing and stuff, because Rust demands that you be very, very strict with your static typing, and state machines can be a little bit loose in that regard, or at least sort of harder to infer what the typings are. But yeah, over Christmas, let's say.
Ragnar asks, has anyone made JetBrains plugins for XState similar to those VS Code extensions?
I certainly haven't. I don't think anyone else in the community has either. The way that we're building this stuff is it's kind of most of the complexity is in open source stuff that you can take away and try fiddling with it on your own. And the VS Code extension is open source as well. I've never used JetBrains. I've never actually tried building an extension for it either. But yeah, it's certainly possible. And if we see a lot of adoption and we see this as something that we really want to pursue, then it won't just be VS Code that we'll be targeting. We'll be targeting all the major IDEs and trying to build something that almost anyone could pick up and use.
Eric has said XState GraphQL.
Yeah, that's been asked for a few years. I think that fits in the same bucket as XState query. Just the ability to naturally, represent GraphQL mutations and things like that in XState, I guess.
Yeah.
So something that people are leaving out of the table is XState UI, maybe a collection of UI components that are modeled in the state charts. It will be pretty cool. It's something that I've been trying to build for the past 2 years, just trials and errors and no luck so far.
Mm-hmm. And you're not alone. Chakra UI is definitely on that track too, as well as Reach UI, which is made by the creators of React Router and now the creators of Remix. They've been doing that for a while. I think they made like a minimal version of XState, and I think they're using XState FSM in some of the components, but they're doing the same thing there. And also Radix. If you don't know Radix UI, that's by the awesome team at Modules. I'm pretty sure they're using some sort of state machine stuff in their components. So it's definitely a viable idea.
Cool. And does anyone here have anything that they want to add to their wish list for XState in 2022? I can start off that I want to have documentation that makes it easy for anyone to get started with XState, and that is going to be my primary focus. That's really what I want to get going in 2022.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge ask in the community. The documentation, like, some people love it, some people are like, it's very dense and they're very scared of like, wow, I have to read all of these different things to understand XState. But as Laura's post shows, and if you haven't read it, please do. It's full of illustrations. The post is titled Introduction to State Machines and State Charts, I believe. It shows you that that's pretty much all you need to read to get up and running. And I believe it's just like a 5-10 minute read. Yeah, and I think we can do a lot more. I think we can do a lot more for different platforms and frameworks, and just to help people and answer all of those commonly asked questions that you've got as well. Absolutely.
How about you, David? What's the top of your wish list for 2022?
Honestly, like,
too many things.
yeah, too many things. I'm working really hard on version 5, and there's just a few things left to go there, and hopefully we'll have an alpha out by next year. And so my wish list is like some of our goals is just making that more modular, so smaller bundle size. Pick only what you need. Make it more flexible and definitely more type safe, which I know Matt and Mateusz have been working on. And yeah, just literally everything that we're working on in the editor is part of my wish list and has been for a few years right now. So yeah.
That does actually remind me, I'm so sorry, T-Vac, that I missed you off earlier when we did initially ask about what's on your XState wish list for 2022 on the Discord. T-Vac did say V5. Oh,
yeah. So V5 coming slowly but surely.
Matt, have you got anything on your wish list for 2022? What's one thing you could pick?
My Twitter feed is just like my XState wish list, basically. So, all the things we've been working on, I would love this. Let me think. The inputs PR is probably one that I'm really, really excited for. It just makes a lot of things easier in React. I'm excited to use it in production code and excited to play around with it more. And it's there, it's going into V4, and it's going to be merged soon. But other than that, yes, I am cheating and saying a second one. I can't wait to ship the visual editor. I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it and start playing around with it and I think that's going to be a seismic shift in the way that we build code with state machines.
And Fazad, what's on your wish list?
I think the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is to just get a hold of all the things that we're progressing on: the core, XState parser, form, extensions, and the visual editor, maintaining the blog, and writing more. We're doing a lot of stuff, and I feel like we're kind of jumping between different things. And I just want to get a hold of all of them and be like the master of all. Something like that. Be Matt Pocock next year.
I mean, I'm blushing, but you can't see.
Ayush says, visualizer, but like GraphQL Playground, runs with an additional NPM script.
That would be cool. Yeah, totally.
And Ragnar says, I would love better/simpler TypeScript type exports from model-based machines.
That's very reasonable. We could probably work on that this week. Raise an issue, Ragnar. That sounds very doable.
Mm-hmm.
Frankie Snow says, I miss a collection of real-life commented examples for beginners, either in screencast or in plain code. This is definitely something that we want to get doing, and we want to make more examples. If there's any particular real-life examples you want to see as well, let us know.
We actually have a collection of them. At least I keep them personally, and I've been trying to wear Matt down to get him to live stream all of that, because he's master of demos and he needs to use the visual editor now to build all of them. But jokes aside, I think we can work out on a list of examples. As you said, shouldn't be hard. Steve at least has been working on. He has a state chart library, and he has a collection of all the examples. Maybe we can just port them to XState. This is just something we've been talking about for the past few months, at least.
Yeah.
There's also my project XState catalog as well, which is sort of fulfills a little bit of this need, but yeah, we need a ton more examples, especially integrations with different libraries and things.
Okay, getting back to the wish list, I would love for the visual editor to be able to pick these real-life examples and just install them from registry right in the visual editor. If you need like an infinite scroll, just be able to search through the registry inside the visual editor and install that with just a click, something like that.
Yeah. That's my like North Star wish list, where basically the registry is a collection of components where it's like, hey, I have an app idea. Let's see, I need a login page. I need infinite scroll. I need pagination. Let me just pull all of these components in and, just put them in. And there we go. My app logic is done. Now all I need to do is wire it up to UI. And going based on like what you talked about, Farzad, just like maybe the ability to automatically create that UI too, or at least a scaffolding for it. Like it would just be so awesome.
That would be cool. John Lombardo says, importing ES modules from the registry directly into Next.js is on my wish list.
This should be already possible, right? With the latest version of Next.js. We just have to work on exporting them into a URL.
Totally. Yeah. I've been looking into this because what I would really love to do is be able to export the ES modules and also somehow get VS Code to pick up like the exported type definitions as well. The reason that is so exciting is that you get the ability to produce type-gen output on the server, which is kind of nuts. So you can build something in the visual editor and import it into Next.js. And the server itself that is serving it does the type gen, and you get perfect types there instead of having to run like a cogen script or anything. So that was just nuts. But this feels like something that could be an easy win, and I don't see why we wouldn't do this.
I was muted. Eric says, I want a play mode in the visual editor that lets you click on the events like the old visualizer did.
This is in progress.
Yeah, I literally did a PR for this week. I think it's actually been approved as well. It's just we haven't merged it yet, and we probably won't deploy it before Christmas.
Yep, and then we have some like more things to do with regard to guards and event payloads and things like that, and also like just the visual design of it. But this is coming soon, and I know, Eric, you are a beta tester, so yeah, expect to see this pretty soon.
And for anyone else that wants to be a beta tester, get on the Discord, let us know. We'll add you to the list. We are letting people in quite slowly, because we don't want just everyone reporting the same issues over and over again, trying to get them actually fixed for you. But you will get in eventually, I promise. John also said, Matt adds additional value to my wishes.
See if I can deliver it. I'm not sure.
Now, I know, David, you mentioned this to me before, and I'm not going to make it difficult for you, but I was going to see if you can remember any of the things that you said that a while ago you had a wish list for XState that was maybe a couple of years ago, and you wanted to compare that to where we are now. Now, can you remember anything off the top of your head if you can't find the list itself?
No, so I actually did find the list, but it is actually really, really long, and we did deliver on a lot of the things on that list. But in 2019, we had a community called State Charts on Spectrum.chat, which has been discontinued now. It's read-only, and I think it's just been absorbed into GitHub or something like that. But there were a lot of ideas. One of the top voted ones I see here is a VS Code extension to visualize the current file. I think something like 44 people hearted that, or favorited, whatever they call it on Spectrum. Per state context, would be great. Like a different API for doing XState, which is questionable. I played around with doing a builder API, but then you have two different APIs for XState, so it doesn't make too much sense. Let's see, improve the visualizer. I'm happy to say that, we have done a lot of this with the new visualizer. Like, people have been asking for visualization exports, sharing, more documentation. Let's see, derived states, which I think has been talked about a lot in the ideas channel of our Discord. There's just a ton of stuff. And I'll try to link to it on the Discord, but it's really interesting going down memory lane and seeing all the stuff that we implemented and all the stuff that we could still implement.
Might make a really good blog post, actually, that. Nudge, nudge.
Oh, yeah. a long blog post. There's a lot of ideas in here.
Yeah, maybe we can get some highlights.
The stuff I find most interesting is the kind of stuff that we are doing now that we really couldn't have imagined a couple of years ago, like visually editing your code, or, the GitHub bot, and all this crazy stuff that we've shipped that just did not seem remotely plausible before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, does anyone have any more questions that they want to ask us, saying this is the last office hours of the year, so you're not going to get another opportunity till the first week of January. But I think we've had a decent length one, a bumper edition of office hours today. Anyone on the team got anything else you wanted to share?
I can say something. It was, I think, 2018 that I was first introduced to State Charts and one of David's talks, and that was the time that I got cursed by it, to be honest. So it's almost 4 years ago. It's crazy how time flies. That time I was so impressed by David and his talk, and got into this thing and got my mind blown by his State Chart and why haven't we thought about this and why haven't been doing this before, things like that, But everything seemed quite impossible, introducing to your teams, people didn't know about it. And I tried a lot to enhance the visualizer. David knows about that. We talked about this a lot before the old visualizer. We attempted to work on the next branch for all the crazy ideas that we had with TypeScript integration and all that. They all seemed quite apart and distracted and impossible until we formed a company, and suddenly everything seemed possible. So I just want to say that I'm really grateful for the move, David, and I'm really glad that I'm being a part of making this future happen. It's amazing, totally good stuff. Thank you for that.
I'm so happy to have you and everyone else on the team. I talked about it briefly in the IndieHackers AMA, where like XState was pretty much me and Mateusz for a few years, just working nights and weekends on it. And that was really unsustainable, just because it's become such an important project in many, many companies, even bigger companies than I've realized. Even at Microsoft, even though I wasn't really part of the team that worked on XState for that part, I wish I was. But yeah, so that's why it's just so great to be working on this full time, and to really, say, like, everyone on the team has all of these wonderful ideas. And so because we're such a small company, it becomes a matter of like, hey, let's plan it out, figure it out, scope it, and do it, rather than just, oh, that doesn't fit like the corporate's expectations, or it doesn't move the needle enough. Like, that's how projects die in big companies, and that's why this is really a breath of fresh air.
Totally. I remember when you brought up the idea of maybe forming a company around XState. It was about like, it felt like us like 24 hours later, you said, okay, I'm finishing at Microsoft. We're starting, let's do it. And I can't believe how much energy you've brought to this project and how much you've done over the past kind of few years to, like, people are talking about state charts now, people who have no business talking about state charts, and it's because of you and because of your dedication, because of all the work you've put in. And I can't believe that we're all on this journey together. It's amazing.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. But yeah, now it's a team effort, and hopefully we'll be growing our team by a little bit next year. And yeah, I honestly could not do this like without this team. Like, Matiush and I have already seen like, how much stress it is to do it just by ourselves. So yeah.
I think that is a lovely note to end on. I think good vibes for the new year.
Yeah.
So we hope that the rest of you, if you celebrate, that you have a nice break and happy holidays and a happy new year. And we will see you all in January. Merry Xstatemas to us all.
Merry Xstatemas, everyone.
We will catch you all then.
All right. See you all.
Bye.
I'm waving again.